Welcome, I'm Paul, this is Dave. You're watching my channel's weekly compendium, ending Monday, July 15th, 2024. Case file number 1711, written by Anonymous 0212. The miracle turn that avoids our burn. I was late for an appointment and was speeding up a hill with a curve at the top. Right as I came around the curve, I saw there was an accident with injuries directly in front of me, taking up both lanes. Both lanes coming from the other direction had drivers that had slowed down so they could rubberneck, and people had already started to gather on the sidewalk to my right, so I couldn't get around the accident on either side. I quickly assessed that there was no way I could avoid hitting them, and knew that if I stayed tense, I would sustain worse injuries. So I shut my eyes and relaxed as much as I could, as quickly as I could, and waited for the impact. And waited. But the car kept moving. I opened my eyes to see two clear lanes ahead of me, and when I looked in the rearview mirror, I could see the accident behind me. To this day, I wonder what the people on the sidewalk saw. I am having an unexpectedly strong reaction to other people's identical stories. This happened when I was in my 20s. I'm now in my late-ish 60s, and I've told this story before. I've shared it in pre-social media groups. This is the first time I can remember anyone responding with the same experience, let alone so many people. I said this in a comment last night, but want to repeat it here. I think the reason I'm sitting here tearing up is because some part of me has never been 100% sure this actually happened. I mean, come on, growing up in white American culture, especially being born in 1957, how do you make sense of something like this? How could this be real? So finding out that even a relatively small number of other people have experienced the exact same thing is finally confirmation that it did indeed actually happen. I mean, the chances of me completely imagining every detail of something so specific that I had never heard of or dreamed about before, something supposedly so impossible, then finding out it happened to a bunch of other people, but never really happened to me? Clearly, that's not the case. Case file number 1712, written by Iskro, Twins in the Crowd and the Photograph in Shroud. For context, this happened in 2010-2011 when I was 18 and my sister was 13 or 14. Our city's baseball team had won the World Series that year, and my family, mom, dad, sister, and myself, went downtown for the celebratory parade. We arrived downtown about 15 minutes before the parade began and found a decent spot to stand. Me, being an avid people watcher, began scanning the sea of people standing on the other side of the street. That's when I noticed a girl my sister's age, standing almost directly across from my sister, and I became fixated on her. She was talking to her family, but when she turned back to face the street, I couldn't believe my eyes. She looked identical to my little sister, who was standing right beside me, and I don't mean just your typical doppelganger. My sister is a skinny, white, blonde girl, so we've seen other girls who look like her over the years, and this was different. They were like mirror images of each other. She even had on the same glasses and t-shirt and the same colored jeans. The only difference was this girl's hair was pushed back, and my sister's always had her hair hanging in her face at that age. I was a bit speechless for a minute, and then got the attention of my parents and said, "That girl over there looks exactly like Brenna." Fake name. They looked, and I could see that they were also a bit taken aback by just how much they looked alike, and they agreed with me and pointed her out to my sister. As soon as my sister noticed her, the other girl noticed her at the same time, and they just stared at each other for a minute. At this point, we are all silent and just looking at this girl looking at my sister. The other girl's parents noticed us staring, then noticed my sister. Even though they didn't acknowledge us, I could tell they were thinking the same things we were. I could tell they noticed the resemblance and were weirded out. I had my digital camera with me and I discreetly zoomed in on her, and even took a picture, because I knew people would not believe us when we told them. The zoomed in picture was even freakier. It looked like I had just taken a photo of my actual sister. The parade started not long after, so we turned our attention to that for a moment. When I looked back across the street a few minutes later, the girl and her family were gone. We never saw them again. The other weird part of the story, which is the reason why I share it, is that I made a Facebook photo album that evening with all the pictures I took from the parade, including the picture of my sister's doppelganger, with a caption that said something like, "You may think this is Brenna, but it is not. Freaky, isn't it?" I recall receiving many comments from people who were stunned at the resemblance. A few years later, I was telling a friend about it and went to the Facebook album to show them, and the photo was gone? All of the other photos from that day are still there, except for that one. I guess Facebook could have removed it for some reason, but it didn't make sense why just that photo would have been removed. Would you like my weekly and monthly compilations completely ad-free? If so, check out the link in the description to my Patreon, where for $3 a month, you can get them all completely ad-free. Case file number 1713, written by Cat Van Wall. Robes, Slippers, and Hilton Jitters. I got lost in a lift in the Hilton Zagreb. I was staying on the 5th floor and went up in the lift to use the swimming pool on the 10th floor. Bear in mind that I was wearing only a bikini and the hotel white toweling robe and slider slippers that they give you in your room. Went and had my swim, all good. Put back on my robe and slippers, got in the lift and hit the button marked 5. Got out when it stopped. There was a big 5 on the wall in the lift lobby, so it was clearly the correct floor. Only it wasn't. It led only to a corridor that was an L-shaped dead end. I banged on a few locked doors and shouted, "Hello?" to no avail. On the 10th floor where I'd got in, there were 2 banks of lifts, 2 rows of 3 facing each other, so I thought maybe I should have gotten into the opposite bank instead. Easy, I thought. I'll go back up to the 10th floor, pop across the lobby, and get into one of the opposite lifts. So I get back in and hit the button for 10 and go up. I get out at floor 10, only this isn't where I got in. There's no opposite bank of lifts. I think there were maybe 2 or 3, all in a line. I can see the gym and spa area where I'd been for swimming, not the pool, but a different area was visible from here through the glazed part of a door, through which I could see a collection of gym machines. There was no one in there, no one using them, no staff, compared with the relatively busy reception where I'd gone in for the pool. I banged on this door and yelled for a bit, to no avail. Ventured along a couple of corridors, dead ends, all doors locked, no answer. I went down to level 5 in a different lift, only to find myself back in the dead-end corridor I'd come from. Went back up and then down again, trying different lifts each time. No difference. The room I'd come from, was staying in, had definitely been on level 5. I eventually went all the way down to level 1 or 0, I forget which one is ground floor in Croatia, thinking I'd just get out at reception and walk up the stairs. Nope, it was an underground parking garage. I tried each lower level, only to find more and more underground parking garages, and eventually a totally deserted reception of a building that wasn't the one I'd been staying in, or the Hilton at all. It looked like some kind of office block. So I got out there, walked out onto the street, still in my white robe and looking like a psychiatric unit escapee, walked around the corner and back into the Hilton reception from outside, trying to style it out and waltz up the stairs like I walk around Zagreb in the bathrobe all the time. My now ex-husband was wondering why I was taking so long. To this day, I'm not sure whether he believes me about what happened, and I've never been able to tell anyone else what happened without receiving looks of great skepticism. Case file number 1714, written by Snoo Macaroons 4456. Gaming Night Delight turns into a fright. Yesterday at 5 PM, I was playing the new OG map game mode on Fortnite while sitting in a Discord call with my friends. Suddenly, I received a missed phone call from a number with no caller ID. Usually, I don't answer calls from unfamiliar numbers, but I was expecting a call from a job I had applied for. Thinking it might be them, I decided to answer. Upon answering the second call from the same no caller ID number, I asked, "Hello?" The loud gunshots and sound effects from Fortnite made it hard to hear at first, so I removed my headset to listen better. The female voice on the other end sounded like my girlfriend, and her tone seemed offended when I asked who it was. To confirm it was her, I inquired about the caller ID, and the response matched how my girlfriend would react if she was genuinely confused. She asked to come over, suggesting a Lyft instead of Uber because of a $5 discount I had for the Lyft ride, and also we share the same Lyft and Uber accounts. Despite being surprised by the accurate details, something felt off, especially since she didn't know the driver was even close by. Slightly suspicious, I bought the Lyft, but then hesitated when she asked for the money instead so she could buy it herself. This led me to consider a potential AI scam, and so I canceled the ride, especially since she had mentioned not wanting to come home with me earlier that day. Upon calling my actual girlfriend, she denied making any calls, leaving me puzzled. The bizarre encounter left me contemplating the idea of alternate realities intersecting due to her very accurate responses, as no other explanation seemed plausible. Perhaps in a different universe, or just an AI scam trying to get money from me. It was too coincidental though, and someone would have to be stalking me to know these things. I do think it's possible though, that higher versions of ourselves exist with everything we desire, wanting to be manifested through the energy we create around us. Case file number 1715, written by Tinkerbell 111. Sync, sync, think. I fairly regularly get my hair cut and colored, and I've been going to the same salon, seeing the same hairstylist for about a year now. So I visited this salon no less than 8 times, because I have had other stylists not rinse the color out thoroughly before. I am fairly vigilant about the process, as I don't want the color on my scalp longer than necessary. The hairstylist I've been seeing for the past year does an okay job, but several times I've asked her to rinse a little more in a certain area of my scalp. It feels like she misses. Because of my thoughts around the process, I've noticed several times that their black sinks don't allow the stylist to see if the water is clear or colored when the hair is in the process of being rinsed. I've thought to myself that they likely have the black sinks for their aesthetic because a white color may get stained or show dye and spots, etc. with prolonged use. On multiple occasions, I 100% remember thinking, she can't really tell if the color is out because she won't be able to see it against the black sink. Cut to yesterday. I go to get my hair done, and when it's time to rinse, she takes me to the sinks. They're all white. I notice this right away because, as with each time before, the same thought process about the rinse is running through my mind. I say, "Oh, you've gotten new sinks." And she replies, "No, we've always had the same sinks. You must be confusing them with the black chairs." Because I'm not new to glitches, I immediately understand that is what happened, and smile to myself, not needing to bring the conversation any further with her. If you've ever experienced a glitch though, you'll know it's something that stays with you, something you want to share. Case file number 1716, written by LearnStock Be Informed. 4 years gone, and now it's on. I don't know how this can happen, but hear me out. 4 years ago, I lost a video game cartridge. I was playing it one day and gone the next. Turned the house upside down and never found it. Now the only people living in my house are myself and my partner. We have no kids or pets. The house is very tidy and organized. I'm kind of a freak about it. After a couple months, I accepted the game as just gone. Over the past 4 years, furniture has been moved and every part of the house was cleaned multiple times. We have a TV cabinet with a small cupboard on either side. The left-hand side is totally empty, and always has been. I just have nothing to put in it, but when I'm cleaning it, I often open it just to dust inside. I have done this at least once a month, more likely every couple of weeks, for 4 years. The cupboard has remained empty. 2 days ago, I opened it up to dust, and the game cartridge was sitting on the shelf. There's absolutely no way, like, how? My partner was just as shocked and confused as I was. I know for sure it wasn't him who put it there, and no one else has been in our house. It seems like such a mundane and dumb glitch, but I can't explain it. Case file number 1717, written by Poster Nutbag. The echo of hello, but he didn't show. I was coming home from work one day, about 6 years ago. Nothing remotely out of the ordinary. The place I was living in at the time had a very narrow hallway that led to the also narrow back door. The door most of us use daily. There's a staging area for wiping your feet and taking off your shoes, which I'm sure is pretty normal with entrances and exits. On this particular day I drove home, and as usual, used the back door to get into the house. When I did this, I hit something as I opened it, and was met with an audible, "Oh," in a familiar voice. I live with my landlord. This did not seem at all unusual. I just figured my landlord had gotten home a minute or so, even a few seconds before me, and was just taking off his shoes or coat or whatever in the small staging area in the narrow hallway. I closed the door, waited 30 seconds or so for him to presumably finish what he was doing, and I opened the door again. The thing is, upon doing so, there was no sight of my landlord. He wasn't in the communal kitchen or living room, nor the main floor bathroom. He would have to walk across the entirety of the house and up the stairs to get anywhere private. And I certainly didn't hear any scurrying or fast movements. Kinda weird. I went upstairs. where my landlord and other roommates' rooms are, to see if I was going crazy. The only roommate that was home was one that was known to not leave the room very often, which I could hear talking loudly to people over a voice chat, something he did often. I have a hard time believing he would have had time to even make it up from the back door to his room, jump into a voice chat, and besides, it was definitely not his voice I heard when I opened the door previously. My landlord always kept his door closed and locked, so while I couldn't directly investigate if he was in his room, there was no noises coming from it. He really wasn't there. After this cursory investigation, I went back to my room to decompress a bit after work, attributing this to me going a bit crazy or something. But to confirm my previous investigation, my landlord walked in the back door approximately half an hour later with his briefcase, coat, nice shoes. He was just getting home from work. I was immensely weirded out, and didn't even run by him at this point what I had experienced. I am sure I had opened the door and bumped into someone. I'm sure that someone was my landlord. I had heard their voices 1,000 times, but that just wasn't possible. There was no one that could have been in the doorway, and it certainly couldn't have been my landlord. Case file number 1718, written by Slice of Lemons. Dad's return, but a new voice to learn? Years ago, when I was around 18 and lived with my parents, I was sitting in the living room chatting with my mom and sister. My dad had gone out to play pool a few hours earlier. We heard the back door open, which was not visible from the living room, and continued to chat as we assumed it was my dad coming home. As soon as we heard the footfalls of the person inside the house walking toward the living room, we all paused and stared at each other, confused. My dad was a tall, heavy man and had very distinctive footfalls, and these were different. They did not have the same weight or pattern. My immediate thought was, did Dad invite someone over? Even though that's not something he ever did. As the footsteps got closer, we heard a man's voice call, "I'm home!" And I looked to my mom and sister, who both seemed as concerned as I was. The voice sounded nothing like my dad's or like anyone's voice we'd recognize. I don't think he could sound like that if he tried. I can't describe it other than it was a completely different voice, someone else's voice. My mom stood up, shaken, just as my dad rounded the corner into the living room. We just stared at him in shock. Dad, was someone else in the house? He gave me a puzzled look and asked what I meant. My mom then asked, "Whose voice was that in the house?" We asked if he was speaking in some kind of different voice, and he, baffled, said no. There was no one else in the house, and he was speaking in his normal voice. It has unsettled my mom, sister, and I ever since. It's hard to convey over text, but it was an entirely different person's voice. If it was only me who was there, I would have doubted myself, but we all had the exact same experience. It was like the universe got confused and assigned the wrong person, but corrected it at the last second. We still talk about the time that Dad came home, but it wasn't Dad. Case file number 1719, written by Caprimum. The vase lost, leaving me star-crossed. This happened to me 3 days ago. I'm still in a shock, disbelief, slightly scared mindset. So I've lived in my current home for just 1 year this week. When I moved in, I had a small vase with fake thistle and heather in it. I had owned this vase for many years previous to this, and it had survived 3 house moves so far. It lived in various places in the new house since we moved in, either in my fireplace, on my side table, or in my hallway. It moved out of the hallway permanently, as the windowsill it was on had a leak over winter, and there was nowhere else for it to go in the hall. My 3-year-old smashed said vase around 6 months ago when she knocked it off the fireplace, and myself, my 2 eldest daughters, laughed at the old Hubba Bubba chewing gum wrappers. They had stashed them there many years previously. I actually remember saying out loud, I've had this vase since first address, I'm gutted." Circle around to this week. My 3-year-old was playing a peekaboo game on the porch with me and the other girls, and to hide from her behind the door, we had to squish up against the wall. And my oldest daughter parked her bottom on the small window ledge in the hallway. It is 60 centimeters wide and around 15 centimeters deep, if that. Nothing there. I came out of the lounge less than half an hour later to go upstairs. Sat there on the windowsill is the vase, intact, on the edge of the sill. Instantly I recoiled and shouted, "Oh my God, what is that doing there?" I was dumbfounded, but scared at the actual unknownness of it reappearing. All 4 kids came to the stairway and hallway thinking I'd seen a spider or something. Upon seeing the vase, my eldest goes, How? Mom, we literally sat there half an hour ago, and that was a smashed vase. She even repeated the gum wrapper anecdote. I have no idea how it's ended up back here. I do have small psychic tendencies, thoughts that manifest days later, knowing when people are going to pass, etc., but this has thrown my head. To stop the kids worrying, I said, "Right, let's Google the meaning of the flowers, as it has to be a sign." Sure enough, if you Google them, they bring protection, etc. Funnily enough though, this isn't the only glitch I've experienced in this house. I was cooking a cottage pie and opened the lid on the Worcestershire sauce. It spun, hit me, the stovetop, and never hit the ground. My kitchen has 2x2 meter floor space. No gaps in the kickboards or under the washer or oven are big enough. I've never found the lid to the bottle. I scoured the floors on my hands and knees. Never found it. Case file number 1720, written by Admirable Cobbler 319, The Mind's Eye Mystery and Fallible History. Several years ago, I was having a hard time with life. My mom had recently died, my dog had recently died, and I may have been going through some sort of midlife crisis. I decided to try meditation to try to get a grip on everything, but I had no idea how to meditate, still don't. So I found a guided meditation on YouTube. The video was pretty typical, get comfortable, focus on breathing, blah blah blah. Then he says, I want you to focus on the memory of your best day. Immediately, I remembered my best day. It was a summer after I graduated from high school. I had no adult plan and made a spur-of-the-moment decision to take a road trip. I had quite a bit of money from all the graduation gifts. My mom was not on board. She said there was no way she would allow an 18-year-old girl to drive around the US on her own. We were arguing about it, and my stepbrother's friend overheard. He offered to go with me. We talked about it for weeks, and begrudgingly, my mom gave permission. The first few days were awkward. I knew this boy, but didn't really know him. But with nothing else to do while driving, we talked about everything. We had so much more in common than I had previously realized. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, we became friends. The specific memory during the guided meditation was of the two of us sitting in a diner. We sat across from each other in a booth. I can perfectly remember how the sunlight reflected off his hair, and in that moment, I was in love with being alive. But here's the thing, that never happened. None of it. I didn't go on a road trip. I never became friends with this person. When the video told me to remember my favorite memory, the diner scene popped into my head and I somehow knew the backstory. It was one of the strangest things I've ever experienced. I know it sounds like I just made up an imaginary story, but it didn't feel like a made-up story. It was a memory. I wasn't daydreaming. I was remembering. Case file number 1721, written by Rudest Boy, The Homespun, Goblin Run. Growing up, me and my brother were latchkey kids. I was in 7th grade, and my brother was like 2nd or 3rd grade, early 2000s. We would be home alone from the time we got home from school until our mom got home around 6 p.m. One day we were watching TV, and there was a loud thud, like something fell in one of the bedrooms at the end of the hall. Then the pitter-patter of feet running. I turned to look down the hall, and then running towards us was, I guess, like a goblin gnome Rumpelstiltskin thing. It honestly looked like a small 2 to 3 foot tall medieval peasant. I couldn't believe what I saw. It ran down the hall past us and then out of our back door. I watched it the entire time. It's not like I saw it out of the corner of my eye. I remember looking over at my brother and he said, "Did you see the little man?" And I immediately started crying, grabbed him, then our cordless house phone, and sat on the front porch to call our mom and told her to come home. I've never had any paranormal experiences before or after that. We don't come from a religious family, or one that believes in that sort of stuff. We weren't watching anything scary. I really don't know. Me and my brother are both grown now. We still tell that story sometimes camping, at parties, and I can tell most people don't believe us, but it's true. I've read of group and shared hallucinations, but really don't know what else it could be. Case file number 1722, written by On and On Anon. A day turned tragic, but resolved with magic. I learned how to crochet about 15 years ago. One day when I was first learning, I was sitting at my desk with a project because I needed to follow the pattern on my computer. I dropped my crochet hook. It was a bright blue, almost aqua color. I bent down to look for it and it wasn't there. My carpet was a very light carpet, and there was nothing on the floor. It wasn't hiding under papers, for example. Nothing was on the floor. I looked around thinking maybe it had rolled somewhere. Nothing. I was confused and also annoyed because I needed that hook. Each size was a different color and I needed that size. And since I had just recently learned, I only had one hook in that size. Later I ran to Walmart and picked up another one, so now I have two, the new one and the missing one. A few days later I was crocheting again. My husband came out of our bedroom with the hook that was missing. He happened to see it in the basket where I kept my crochet stuff. I know that it was missing in our office area, not my bedroom. I thought that maybe one of the kids found it and put it back. Weird and unlikely, but explainable. Cool, now I have two hooks in that size. Another few days passed and I didn't really think about it anymore. I was at my desk again, not crocheting. Something caught my eye and I looked down and the hook was there, exactly where it would have been when I dropped it originally. It had not been there when I sat down. So I picked it up and thought that it was definitely weird and went to put it in the basket in my room. And when I did, there were already two hooks in that size in my basket. Now I know for 100% sure that I started with just one hook. Because this was a new hobby for me, and I had just a few hooks and no duplicates. If this happened now, I'd have no idea how many I have in each size, but at that time, I definitely only had one. Then I bought one to replace it, which makes two. So how in the world did a third one show up? Right where the original one disappeared about a week earlier. Case also file 1711. The miracle turn that avoids our burn. I really wish quantum immortality was a testable phenomenon. All we can have now are accounts of where it happens to someone per their experience, which is good, but you can never confirm it for yourself. Unless you're in that kind of environment where an accident or something was supposed to kill you, you know it, there's no way to avoid it, and yet it doesn't. In reality it does, you just don't experience that death. Which is interesting because a lot of people do remember their deaths in quantum immortality. But in some cases, unless you're directly there to witness it, maybe your consciousness cuts out prior, so there's no imprint on your soul to carry it to your memories in the new host body. That would be the advice I could give. If you're in a situation where it looks like there's absolutely no way out and you're going to die, close your eyes. Try not to engage with that experience. And then when you're in the new reality, you won't even remember it, because I can't imagine much worse than remembering your own death. And I'm sure you remember the pain of it and everything. Oof. So, close your eyes. Case answer file 1712. Twins in the crowd and the photograph in Shroud. Right, so doppelgangers are common, but it's especially not common to have photographic evidence just deleted from a server. And I'm assuming from the phone as well where you took it from, or probably would have been deleted a long time ago. But if it hadn't been, it probably would have been by whatever force did this. Reminds me of the scene in Back to the Future, towards the end, where the photograph is there, you know what it's supposed to be, but one person in it is fading out. Is this a willed force, or more along the lines of, you took a photograph of a version of you that wasn't supposed to be occupying this universe, and eventually when that error was corrected, the photographic evidence was also removed, because it never happened. I guess that's interesting, but it does mean that memory can't be wiped, because that still exists in your mind. I do wonder what would have happened if you had approached this girl, especially with your sister in tow. Can only imagine. Now time for the quote of the day. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. In the beginning, the universe was created. This has made a lot of people very angry, and been widely regarded as a bad move. I do love that quote. It is kind of silly. The movie is somewhat cynical, and I wouldn't say pessimistic or nihilistic, but it does make you feel like, oh wow, we as humans don't really matter much, do we? Now on the cosmic scale, that might be true. But I'm still glad the universe exists, with one caveat. As long as it's not infinitely repeating, as in it expands and then contracts back to itself and then reoccurs exactly the same way. That would suck, because so many people have terrible lives that are not their fault. Born with diseases or in war-torn countries. You know, what of the children born in North Korea now? They didn't choose that fate, and there's really no way around it. So yeah, an infinitely repeating universe would be hell. But, as long as it's not that, I'm good for the ride. Case also file 1713. Robes, slippers, and Hilton Jitters. Okay, so yeah, multiverse space-time portal. You crossed into a different universe, one that was wildly different. And I think those portals, they can transcend to faraway locations, faraway universes, where in quantum immortality, generally speaking, it's right next door. But this would be clear evidence that those portals can transmit you far away. Though, where was it? Was it in the hallway, or rather the elevator itself, acting as a kind of buffer between realities? We've seen multiple accounts where people board elevators in hotels often, and then they're just not in the same hotel anymore. So hotels acting sort of like a Faraday cage, but for space-time itself. Elevators are so bizarre, yet I'm not really that afraid of them, even knowing all this, because the frequency is still very, very, very low, given how many people take elevators. But there is something about them that stumps us. Caissons file 1714. Gaming Night Delight turns into a Fright. I think your instincts are probably correct that this was some sort of AI scam. With only a small snippet of someone's voice, you can replicate their voice pretty accurately, not 100%, but like 85-90% of the way. There's this website called 11 Labs, where if you do this, you input your own voice, you can have it narrate almost anything. Which is interesting given my line of work. And it's in part why I decided to go on camera, because I didn't want people to think that, oh, I'm just using an AI program to do this. No, it is me. It's YouTube, right? If I remove the you, well, it's just tube, and it's like any other fictional thing you can watch. It's not what I wanted. But it is kind of interesting and scary at the same time, the advent of new technology and how quickly it's advancing for AI systems. Makes you wonder what the future, even in 5 years, is going to be, let alone 50. Can't even begin to imagine. None of us can. Though on this story, if it was a scam, it seems like a very small amount of money to try to scam. So I don't know, maybe it was your girlfriend from a different universe and the lines just got jumbled along the way. Hard to say, but it almost seems more likely to be the latter. Because again, of how small the amount of money scammed is, it doesn't seem worth it. Especially for such an advanced kind of scam. What do you think? Now time for the quote of the day. V for Vendetta. Behind this mask, there is more than just flesh. Beneath this mask, there is an idea. And ideas are bulletproof. They sure are. But ideas are like water. They can erode away stone, but they take a long time to build up momentum. And even when the momentum is there, the erosion is very slow. So be careful about ideas, because they can spread. They can only be cured with better ideas. Very dangerous. But as they say, the pen is mightier than the sword. Very true. Case notes for file 1715. Sink, sink, think. So back in the day when I still had hair, I actually dyed my hair blonde. I don't know why. It was a weird phase. Just thought that was funny. Reading this story reminded me of that. But yeah, it seems like a multiverse crossover. Though, if it's persistent to the extent it was, then it must have been quantum immortality. What is the catalyst? Did one of the hairstylists kill you? That's grim, but also kind of funny to think death by a hairstylist. I don't even want to imagine the gruesome details involved in that. No thanks. Caissons file 1716. 4 years gone, and now it's on. Classic de-rendered object, DOP. But it's kind of ironic, given that it happened to a video game cartridge. And again, if you don't know, video games have this process where the camera renders what you're seeing, or dictates what is rendered. So if it's not in your field of view, it simply doesn't exist. It might exist on the back-end in code, but it isn't being processed by the CPU or GPU, which is a very good way to save on computational resources, and I think exactly how our universe simulation works. Caissons file 1717. The echo of hello, but he didn't show. Yeah, so you hopped over to a different universe in that instant, or he did over to yours. But because there were no other differences in your universe, I'm guessing it was a landlord that was bumped into by, in his universe when he went back, no one. So you were both very confused for different reasons. Also, living with roommates can be fun. Through most of my 18 to 25, I lived with a lot of roommates. One house was like 4 other roommates in one. It was a big house though, but you get used to it. And even though I'm an introvert, there's something pleasant about that, knowing there's other people around. Now time for the quote of the day. From Bruce Almighty. Parting your soup is not a miracle, Bruce. It's a magic trick. A single mom who's working 2 jobs and still finds the time to take her kid to soccer practice? That's a miracle. I really like the message of that movie, where you can't just wish away your problems. And what should really be commended is people just going about their day, doing normal jobs, a lot of manual labor. It's good for the soul. There's no doubt about that. Trust in Morgan Freeman. He does have good advice, at least in his roles. And he just says it so well. Case also file 1718. Dad's return, but a new voice to learn? I think it's a jumbled signal issue. Or again, if this is a simulation, then our data, our actions, can be translated into frequency, into data. So the type of voice your dad has from a different universe transmitted over to this one, which isn't much of a stretch. I think information transferring is much more common than physical matter. Though I think it was the same soul, just a different corporeal form. That is a thought though. What if you died, you go through quantum immortality, your soul transmits to a different you in a different universe, but it's different enough where your body is different, where you have a different voice, a different face, different hairstyle, that's not so big a deal, but a different voice and everything. That would be wild and trippy. I've never read a story yet where someone woke up and they felt like they were in the wrong body. They remember their face being different. Maybe that'll happen, but I'm guessing for the you in a different universe to be that divergent from the you in this universe, the gap between universes would have to be so massive, it just isn't something that usually happens. But I don't think it's impossible. Again, that would be trippy. Case also file 1719. The vase lost, leaving me star-crossed. An isolated region of space-time surrounding the vase, and that created this rewinding effect, where not only did it reappear, it was fixed. I wonder if the candy, the bubblegum wrappers were still back in it. My guess is they were, even if you took them out before. Again, this was a time reset, localized only to that vase. So if you want more gum, you know where to go. Now time for the joke of the day. What do Alexander the Great and Winnie the Pooh have in common? They have the same middle name. Indeed. Case file number 1720. The Mind's Eye Mystery and Fallible History. That is just a brutal start to the story, and I think it would have crushed the spirit of anyone affected by so much tragedy in such a short amount of time. I'm just sorry to hear that. Wow. Thing is, who's to say this memory isn't true? We could have lived 1,000,000 times before this, 1,000,000 different iterations of real life. So again, who's to say the memory isn't true? Might just be your soul remembering a memory it's not supposed to, that is suppressed by whatever mechanism is used in the simulation, the real world. So my guess is it was real, just in a different version of the game. And I think there's a beauty in that. Case notes for file 1721, the Homespun Goblin Run. So two things on this. The first thing is I'm imagining Peter Dinklage running around as a thief. I mean, if he wanted to, no one would believe their eyes that Peter Dinklage is a thief. They would just be so befuddled and flabbergasted that they wouldn't say anything. Who would believe them? But the second note is, even small people, whatever you want to call them, they still exist. There's quite a few of them around, people like 3 foot tall or something, and there's nothing saying they couldn't be thieves, and given their size, they could fit into places where other people couldn't, so they would be probably pretty good at it too. So you might have just seen a common thief that was uncommonly sized. Case notes file 1722. A day turned tragic, but resolved with magic. Yeah, so you have classic DOP and then duplication, because it did come back when it wasn't supposed to. Also, I'd just say that being able to sew is a very useful skill. My clothes always get frazzled, especially socks, so the ability to just sew them back into place, well, not bad. Which I'm assuming is what crochet means. I'm honestly not sure. I'll have to look it up after, but I'm sure it involves needles and sewing something. Pretty sure. Now time for the joke of the day. What drink is most dangerous to cats? Curiosity. A very rare arcane blend of tea. But yes, curiosity did kill the cat, but I think it's still important to have curiosity. Don't let fear of death rule it out. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.